This week's college football poll is going to be a little bit longer because I just think it deserves the attention after having 5 of the top 11 teams this weekend lose. Could have been a 6 with Miami down 35-10 at Cal. Shout out to the East Coasters that stayed up for that one. And we are dangerously approaching no one is good season where you can start getting into the transitive property of, well, this team beat this team, but that team did this and all the things. It's like, okay, you want to do this? Let's do it. Let's do it all day. I'd like to believe somebody's good, but I'm confused. I don't think this poll is going to be very popular this week, and I'm not doing it for any other reason than all the reasons I'll explain. So let's get into it. Some thoughts on Bama's loss at Vandy as well. Texas stays at number 1 for me. I had them number 1 last week. The AP had Bama. Coach's poll had Bama. Texas was off. Congrats to Texas. Number 2, Ohio State. Not really much debate on this one. 5-0. They beat an Iowa team that Iowa, it's kind of like the Kyrie rule, right? Kyrie, the expectations were so low what he would mean to a franchise because of his history, the stuff he did. And then he gets to Dallas and it's smooth sailing. They make it to the NBA Finals. It was even better for Kyrie because he could have absolute donut playoff games and nobody seemed to care because it was like, well, he didn't punch a kid, you know? Like the standard for where you kind of thought, like, what's going to happen? Like, when's he going to ask out? Is he going to quit on the team? Is he going to do all these things? It's like, no, he's out there playing hoops all season long. And the team did really well. And then it's like, man, people need to apologize to Kyrie. Like, I don't think so. But our standard for him had gotten so low that him just playing basketball again was like thought to be this incredible accomplishment. And that's kind of what Iowa's offense is like, is just because this year isn't as disastrous, has historically like mocked every single week as we had trackers because of what they had said about their own offensive coordinator and these marks that they had hit. But Iowa's offense isn't good. It's just better than disastrous. So Ohio State, who we've said throughout the season, like they don't even have to play. I don't think we've seen their A game. They can play like a B- game, and it still doesn't really matter. So yeah, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt a little bit. And they go to Oregon to play somebody real this week. 3.5-point favorites in Eugene. So staying with Eugene, Oregon. I don't necessarily love having them 3, and that's probably based on my own expectations for them before the season got started. Maybe it's the 2 Dylan Gabriel picks on Friday night. But here's what has been solved. Since the early numbers from the first 2 weeks, Idaho and Boise, they can run the football again. Jordan James is one of my favorite players in all of college football. If you are not ready when you think you're about to tackle him, it is going to hurt. 24 for 165, 7 yards per carry, 0 sacks again in that win against Michigan State. So after the 2-week stuff, a lot of the concerns about giving up sacks and not being able to run the football, that's stopped. And look, they've taken care of who they needed to with an undefeated record, smashing Oregon State, UCLA, who wasn't good, and then taking out Michigan State, who I don't think many of us have much expectations for after watching the first month. Number 4, here's where it gets interesting. I don't love it, and I know some of you are going to hate it, but I still have Bama there at 4. I'm allowing you to just take a breath. The AP and coaches did not care about head-to-head. They jumped Georgia ahead of Bama, which, as the season progresses, head-to-head isn't the end-all, be-all, but this becomes a bit like that TCU-Baylor debate that we had like 10 years ago, where the team that lost the head-to-head is pointing at the other team saying, yeah, we lost to you and you're good, but your loss is way worse than our loss. Losing to Vandy is worse than losing to Bama. I understand it, but I don't know. It just felt weird a week later to go, now I'm just going to put Georgia back in front of them. But that's what everybody else did. So there you go. I have a lot on Bama here, so I'm just going to keep moving. I have Georgia 5. Why? Good loss. Took care of Auburn. Highlight of this game was probably a 4th and 1 where Peyton Thorne had to make a read on the edge, and he kept the ball, and Javon Walker, 11 for Georgia, who I love, just blow the whole play up, where if he had handed it off inside, I don't know that they would have converted it. I don't know if there was some kind of call that Thorne was supposed to make at the line of scrimmage, but Walker just destroyed the whole play. So that's like, sometimes you get to tip your cap to them. But it was fun because I love when our guy Sean McDonough gets a little spicy, and you knew he just wanted to he was asking McElroy, like, what does Freeze do? Because Freeze was yelling at Peyton Thorne. And nobody likes Freeze right now. And Freeze is yelling at Thorne. And I don't know if it was because he kept the ball or if he was supposed to do something else at the line of scrimmage. And McDonough like wanted to so badly just like unleash on Freeze because Freeze has just a very low approval rating right now. And McElroy like left a bit of an out going, I don't know if there was something else that Thorne was supposed to do there. But McDonough was ready to attack. And I was all for it. I was excited about that one. All right. Number 6, Penn State. Penn State is 4 in both of the polls, which I completely understand. And maybe is the right call. And maybe this is a bit about the Fox. Wait, Penn State's behind Georgia in the coaches. They're 5. Maybe it's a little bit about the Fox propaganda that we saw in the UCLA game where they were like, if you'd had 12 teams in the previous playoff format of 4 teams, Penn State would have made the playoffs 6 times, 3 more than any other program that didn't get in. And you're like, okay. They're like, oh, they're the only team to start the last 4 years 5-0. Like, okay, then what happened? So even though the West Virginia game, like last year, that tricked me into kind of really believing in Penn State last season, a 34-12 domination. The offense does look that much better with the new OC. And look, when you look at Aller's stats, if you go back to last year and this year, the completion percentage has gone from 60 to 71%, the yards per attempt 7 to almost 11. Last year, his touchdown pick split, remember this, like how impressive it is on paper, 25-2. I actually thought that became a problem because it just showed how apprehensive he was about certain throws, where he's just like, I'm not going to throw a pick. This year, the split's 9-1. But look, all I care about with Penn State is what do 3rd and 7s look like against Ohio State. That's the only thing I care about. USC doesn't look as daunting as an opponent this upcoming week with their loss to Minnesota. I still think USC is a decent enough team. We'll see what happens there. But momentum-wise, you feel better about Penn State. So, look, the defensive numbers, they're 5th in opponents' yards per play allowed, 3.8. That's these 5 games, though. Last year, they were number 2 in college football. I love Abdul Carter. I love Jalen Reed. We know the defense is really good, but some of the yardage numbers allowed last year, okay, they were number 2 in college football. I'm not sure Michigan even wanted a first down in the second half of that game last year. So they don't play Michigan. They've got the SC game. And as we said, 11-2 is when they're going to be playing Ohio State at home. And then the rest of the way, Washington, nice win from them. Purdue, who's awful. Minnesota, the USC win. And then the Maryland Terrapins. So, look, does it feel a little unfair to have Penn State behind a couple of these SEC teams? Yeah, I'll allow it. Not in line with the AP and coaches poll? Yep, accurate. Based on nothing? No, I don't think it's based on nothing. Are you telling me I'm giving Ohio State the benefit of the doubt the way I'm not giving Penn State the benefit of the doubt? Yep, you're absolutely right. Guilty. If it were 2 losses, again, 2 losses, let's not even talk about it because this is even a kind of conversation. But I always feel like with 1 loss, I'm still going to be reluctant to vote somebody ahead of the team with 1 loss that I just don't think is as good as those other 2 teams. And to this point, yeah, it's a little carryover from the previous year. That may seem ridiculous as well, but I think we're all guilty of it in the way we look at these top tier programs. It's not the end of the world. All right. I've got them 6th instead of 4th. All right. Miami. I have them at 7. This is probably a 2-week thing with them. They're 6th in both polls, so it's not like I'm way off on this one. Cam Ward is one of the only guys in college football who could bring his team back the way he did against Cal that night. That was awesome. The atmosphere was great. It was such a fun game, just late, chaotic. Having said that, Cam Ward also scares the hell out of me. I feel like when he drops back his inner dialogue, more often than not, it's like, fuck it. The pick back to the middle. This guy loves throwing back to the middle of the field more than any player at the position that you're going to see. And sometimes I think because he had a throw against Florida where it worked. He also had a couple where it didn't, but he had a throw against Florida where it worked, where I think he's convinced that he's the guy that can actually do it. The Cal interception, he had probably 4 throws that I was like, he loves going hard to his right and then throwing it back on the inside. The interception that he threw was like a pop-up back towards the middle of the field. But again, how many other quarterbacks are going to come back in that game down 35-10? It also speaks to how good the receivers are. But there's a bit of a Virginia Tech hangover in this one as well for me. So they're 6-0. Congrats. I have them 7th. Coin toss time. I've got Clemson 8th. The defense isn't great. They're 57th in yards, opposing yards per play. But they're running it really well. Klubnik has almost as many rushing yards as last year with 97 less carries. He's only been sacked 4 times. The touchdown interception ratio, 19-9 last year, 14-2, not even halfway through the season this year. And I just wanted Clemson in front of both of the next two SEC teams. And that's Ole Miss at number 9. I think the win at South Carolina. What if I threw this theory at you? Because I know this will be met with a bit of a rejection based on what the rankings say. But Oklahoma is 18th in the AP, 16th in the coaches poll. South Carolina is not ranked. But what if I said that Ole Miss's win at South Carolina with Lenora Sellers back is in the same ballpark as Tennessee's win at Oklahoma? I'm not saying it's identical, and maybe it's harder because one team has the number in front of it, but I just think South Carolina with the QB back and that defense, and for Ole Miss to be that dominant is a good win. It's a nice recovery from the home Kentucky loss where it's like Ole Miss is just, if they were frauds, that's a closer game, or they lose to South Carolina based on what I've seen from the Gamecocks defense so far this season. And it was 27-3. So I think that's a nice bounce back for them. So that puts Tennessee at number 10, which is the opposite order of what the AP has, but the right order according to the coaches. Again, who cares about any of this stuff, really? Tennessee loses to Arkansas, and it's incredibly frustrating because I was really locked into this game, watched the entire thing, and Green, the quarterback for Arkansas, some of the numbers aren't great. And it was a good 5 picks, but I think he's a baller. He's just tough to deal with. He's a tough runner. He wasn't necessarily tough on the ground in this game against Tennessee because Tennessee's defense was really good. But he's knocked out of the game as Tennessee leads 14-13. And Tennessee, after that moment, punt, turnover on downs. So Tennessee's defense was number 1 in the country in opposing yards per play. Now it's at number 3 behind Ohio State and Texas. But I think it's at least fair to ask what's going on with Nico Iamaleava. Let's have this conversation. Now, we can point to some of the offensive stuff. I think going into that game, they were averaging 58 points per game, which is best in college football. They had the 71 zip spot against Kent State. So maybe it's a little misleading. But if you've watched Nico, and I've watched 3 full games of it now, he's under 200 yards his last 3 games. No picks, okay. He's sacked a few more times than you'd want. I think he's part of the sack blame as well. He's only had over 31 yards rushing once in a game this season. And I really want to focus on that last drive because that was alarmingly bad. So they're down 19-14, even though the backup is in for Arkansas. 35 seconds left. He hits the receiver Thornton Jr. for a 42-yard pass on a 3rd and 2, where he rolls out to his left. The edge rusher falls down because the move Nico puts on him is so nice on the rollout. And he throws just a special ball right down the field, leads the receiver perfectly, moves the chains. So now we've got 1st and 10. Well, then the next throw, and I don't know if it's because he was so hyped up from the previous play, 87 Kitzelman, the tight end, he throws it like 100 miles an hour at him. And there's just there's moments in a game with Nico where I think his arm talent is so incredible that he's firing. I also think guys are dropping some of these passes, or they're super contested catches, which maybe he needs to take some easier wins there. So it was happening throughout the night. And honestly, I keep waiting for this big game. That was my lead up. I knew I was screwing myself when I gave out this game because Arkansas is actually better than their record would suggest going into it, if you've seen their losses. But I've wanted this big kind of Heisman. Right. I mean, look, he was already on the Heisman awareness stuff anyway, but there just hasn't been enough from him. And I think he's actually a little too inconsistent despite the arm talent throughout the course of these games. But on 4th and 5, it's just inexcusable. It's 4th and 5 at the Arkansas 20 with 6 seconds left, and he runs out of bounds. I have we can talk about how calm and he's so in control. He just lost all concept of what he couldn't do on that play. And at that point, it doesn't matter if it's a pick. You got to get the ball up into the air, and he runs out of bounds. So I'm probably being a little harder on Tennessee, but I don't know. I mean, look, I've got him 10. I don't have him 17th. 11, let's give it to Iowa State. 12 in the AP, 13 in the coaches poll. 12. I'm tempted to go A&M, but they don't have the head-to-head against Notre Dame. I could say LSU because Notre Dame's loss at home to Northern Illinois is far worse than LSU's neutral site loss to USC, but let's go with BYU because why not? Couple thoughts on Bama's loss at Vandy. We know it's historic. I hope you've been listening to the pod when I talked about Vandy's quarterback, Diego Pavia, listed at 6 feet, Hart listed at 7'1". If you watch a Virginia Tech game to start the year, you're like, there's something here. There's something going on. The Mizzou game, just a badass running around, trying to find it. Like, he's already out of breath before the first snap because he's so hyped up. And yes, I know Vandy lost to Georgia State, who's 2-2, who lost to Georgia Southern, but throw out the records when State plays Southern. But they're not the doormat that we were all used to with Vandy over the years. And I can only tell you what I saw, because when I was watching what was happening in the game, because there were other games I thought I was going to prioritizing on a Saturday, I'm thinking I have to watch Vandy, Alabama, and I'm glad I did. I know some of you probably think I'm going to come in and rip on Milroe. This isn't a Milroe game. I mean, look, the pick six with a tip ball, the fumble wasn't great. That's not where I'm going to go. They scored 35 points. That should be enough against Vandy. But a defense with Bama that I had questions about, especially in the first half against the USF quarterback Brown, who's just, his own problem. And then they looked like they'd fixed it against Wisconsin. Maybe that's a Wisconsin story. It looked great against Georgia in the first half, but Vandy gashed this team. 418 total yards. The 3rd and 2 to clear out a throw for Pavia for the touchdown to make it 40-28. And I cannot tell you, you had to watch this game to understand how stressful it was for Bama to make a decision on handoffs. The way Pavia runs this offense, the way they make you think about all of these different things that could possibly be coming your way, it either freezes you, frustrates you, or wears you out. And it did all three of those things to Bama's front, and they kicked Bama's ass. Normally in a game like this, that's this historic, because if you look at it, Vandy doesn't win this game ever. If this is going to happen, if the number one team in the country is going to lose to an unranked team, and it's Vanderbilt, right? Not like sneaky Illinois with a nice defense, it's usually going to be like, what happened in the turnovers? And it wasn't just about the turnovers. Alabama couldn't get off the field. This is almost as shocking as that. Was it the Trevor Knight game with Oklahoma where Bama just could not get off the field in third down? That was Oklahoma in that bowl game years and years ago. I think it was a Cotton Bowl. This wasn't really fluky. And it's Vandy's first win against Bama in 40 years. And now their record improves to 1-60 all time against AP top 5 teams. I know some of you want me to have Bama 10. I'm just not going to do it. Because look at it this way. 12-team playoff, Bama's in. 14 playoff, hey, you lost to Vandy. Probably would argue against that.